Hey, friends, family, patriots. Thank you for joining me tonight. Um, this stream has taken me about 24 years to build up the courage to do. But as you can see, this is going to be one of many, hopefully, where I come and I talk to you guys about, just some of the happenings that are going on in the world and some of the noticings as well. So thank you for being part of this inaugural, uh, episode or podcast. Right now I still don't understand what I'm gonna do. Hopefully, this is enough for you folks to kind of come back and hear me out a bit. First and foremost, rest in peace to Charlie Kirk. Um, what I've seen in the past day is an awakening from the left. Yes, there are those that are ignorant and hateful and have celebrated and done all of that, but in in the midst of all that, there's a lot that have come out and basically denounced the Democratic Party, the liberal side, the left, and have said that they don't condone at all what happened in Utah and what happened to Charlie. My condolences go out to his wife and their two kids, and to everyone that loved him and you know listened to him. He was a bright kid. You know, uh, I joked once because he wouldn't touch the Israel topic, but in recent days, it sounds like he was asking questions, and that's why he was wearing a vest. If the stories are true, it sounds like he kind of woke up from that and you know was trying to be prepared for anything that came his way. Happy Patriots Day. Never forget, right? It's 9/11. And for those of you that wished me a happy birthday, thank you so much. I truly, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate it. It's not my official birthday. It's actually what I considered a re-birthday. Because if you don't know me and you haven't heard the story yet, I am a 9/11 survivor. I was inside the towers on 9/11. I escaped just a few minutes before the first collapse. And so, what I wanted to do tonight was basically tell my story. I do have it available if you folks are interested on my website. It's at magaarmor.com. It's under blogs or the blog, and you can read the story there. But if you would indulge me for just a few minutes, I'd like to definitely go over what I experienced firsthand inside of the World Trade Center on 9/11, an event that is etched in a lot of our minds. Obviously, those of us that are old enough to remember where we were on 9/11. So if you're how 24 years. So if you're older than like 30, you probably remember where you were. Um, so what I would want is to basically give you my account and tell you what I saw, what I smelled, what I heard, and kind of just bring you back, not for the purpose of reliving a traumatic experience, but so that you understand that the world is not what we have been told it is. And it took a long time for me after finding out and digging into some of the details of what happened that day, um, to kind of recollect myself. I spent about 3 months in what was basically just my room after 9/11, um, just out of fear, out of confusion, not understanding the world that I was living in, mourning friends that I had lost, co-workers. Um, I suffered survival guilt for sure. And so I would just like to take you down and tell you my story. So please, if you would, just indulge me. So I got to the building. I was a security officer at the World Trade Center, for a company named Summit Security. We were a contractor who was contracted by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, who were the ones that actually owned and operated the World Trade Center. The PATH train ran under the World Trade Center from New York to New Jersey, and I would imagine, it was the primary reason why this joint venture owned this financial building, because that's what it was. It was a financial building. All of the big players had offices there. Morgan Stanley, Dean Witter, everybody who was anybody had offices in the World Trade Center. If they traded on the New York and American Stock Exchange, they had an office at the World Trade Center. So I had been out that previous Monday. 9/11 2001 was on a Tuesday, so I was uh, I was out the previous Monday, and so I came in that Tuesday feeling kind of smug. I had had a nice Monday off, and my replacement for Monday was, I ran into her and she was complaining that she had to do my job. Now, my job was to patrol the basements of the World Trade Center. I worked directly with a property manager for the sub levels. He was in charge of all of the truck docks and the parking garages. He was his name was Ken Grisales. He was basically in charge of making sure that anybody who was in the sub levels of the World Trade Center belonged there. He gave the higher ups of all these companies their parking placards and their permission to park after, a background check and, making sure that they belong there. Now remember, the World Trade Center had been attacked back in 93. So it already had a history of being attacked from under the street level. And so the job was to secure the underground. So I came in, I said good morning. I Under the two towers there were sub levels. Under The entire complex was one giant sublevel called B1. It was the truck dock. It was where all the trucks would come in, park in their respective buildings, and then go into the elevator banks to go upstairs and make their deliveries. Under each tower, under that, were the B2 levels: B3, B4, B5, B6, and there was, in fact, a B7 where a lot of the offices were allowed to store stuff, or maybe even the maintenance folks were allowed to store, just storage. If you ever watch The Office, it's basically where they put Milton. Okay, so on B2 of building one was B2 yellow. That was where Ken's office was. And in Ken's office, there were four of us. It was me, it was Ken, it was another two guys from Summit Security, Antonio Gordon, who was basically monitoring cameras, and he monitored the cameras of all of the entranceways down into the basement. He made sure that anybody driving up to these entrances had the right placards and had their IDs. And then there was Pete De Palma. Pete De Palma was basically brought in to be sort of Ken's protege. He was Ken's underling, and he was the one that was supposed to be learning the ropes, and they were basically grooming him to become sort of the next sub-level property manager. In B2 Red, the second level underneath building 2, the second tower, was the office of Summit Security, the contract security company that I worked for, who was led by Ron Horner, who was the general manager for Summit Security at this site. And that's also where our security dispatch was. It's also where, we had HR, we had a quartermaster who would give out all of the equipment and uniforms, and where all of the security officers' lockers were. So I first come in to B2 Red. I get into my outfit. It's like a mechanic's jumpsuit. Under the jumpsuit, I had a vest, and and I go and I palm in. So back then, crazy enough as it is, 24 years ago, we already had biometrics, and no, we didn't swipe in. We didn't have a time card. We placed our palm into this machine that basically took our information and clocked us in. So I jump into my little golf cart. That's how I patrol the sub levels. And I headed straight out to the truck dock entrance, which was actually located under Building 7. Building 7, for those of you that know, was a federal government building, um, primarily used by the Secret Service, but there were FBI offices in there. The New York City mayor's emergency bunker was located there. And so I headed up that way to go out the truck dock. I wanted to get some breakfast. I didn't want to go into Ken's office right away. I knew I was going to have to switch out videotapes. I knew I was going to have to, deal with some task that I wasn't really up for at that time. So I decided to go get breakfast. I said hello to all the officers that manned that entrance up there. It was generally three officers. And that entrance had the big metal plates that would go up and down that you see in a lot of these like security, places where, if you roll your car over it and they decide to flip the plate up, I mean, it would literally flip a car. And our security officers actually flipped maybe one or two Secret Service vehicles because they were running through without showing their identification. And the security officer, as soon as he presses that button, that thing basically catapults whatever's on the plate. So we had flipped one or two vehicles primarily Secret Service, up at that entrance. So I went to the little breakfast cart to get my breakfast. I headed back downstairs and I got into Ken's office, greeted all the guys. And Ken was upset because his little cart, it wasn't a golf cart, it was more like one of these little metal, just these real heavy metal sort of little carts that you see in construction sites. The closest thing I could describe is if you ever seen the Austin Powers movie, they get stuck in this like hallway and they're just going back and forth with the car because they can't turn it. It looked just like that, but little and yellow. His cart was messed up. So Ken was in a mood and he wanted me to drive him around. Um, and my task that day was to exchange tapes. We had all the security tapes that we needed to exchange, take it up to the 24th floor of the of World Trade Center 2, where the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey's security people were. Now these were, obviously these weren't officers. These were, executives. These were office people. And my job was to take these tapes up there and exchange them for fresh ones and bring them back down. But before then, Ken wanted me to drive him around, do his morning patrols, and show him what was going on. There was construction on the B1, so that's the loading dock. And the loading dock was just a giant cavern encompassing the entrances to Building 7, Building 1, and then Building 2 at the opposite end. There were one down ramp at the very end that led to the loading docks of Buildings 4 and 5. That's also where the Bank of Nova Scotia had a safe where there was a ton of gold. For those of you that have heard the stories, the gold disappeared, right? That safe was down that way, between or in front of the entrances to Buildings 4 and 5. And then there was an up ramp, so you would go down, go to Building 4 and 5, and then come back out at the opposite end and head out the building. So Ken jumps in my cart and he wants to go up to the loading dock where there was construction going on. And we stopped just between Building 7 and Building 1, which were side by side in this loading dock. Now, if you go up to street level, you realize that those buildings were not side by side, but down in this loading dock area, they were one next to the other. And we're talking with some other officers, some other security officers from Summit Security that were doing patrols down there, making sure that the trucks were parking in the right places and, that they turned their trucks off as soon as they got to their dock. And all of a sudden, there's all this chatter coming over the radio. This is how quickly it happened. There was all this chatter coming over the radio, and Ken is trying to, get off the mics. And all of a sudden, there's this giant plume of smoke or dust that shoots out of the First World Trade's loading dock entrance. So of course we jump to action. We run over there. We check to see what's going on. The doors were blown open on two of the elevators. These elevators just so happen to go from the basement all the way up to the 110th floors. So at this point, there's sirens, there's lights going off, there's some chaos, but we don't understand what's going on. In my mind, a bomb just went off because we were actually in charge of checking the trucks that were coming into the World Trade Center. But about a week or two prior, we were taken off of that post. So we were no longer checking the trucks. At this point, what they did was they replaced us with Port Authority police, who were the legal body, the governing body of the World Trade Center. So they had been out there, and in my mind, I'm like, these guys, they don't know what they were doing out there, so they probably let something in, and something went off. So Ken tells me, go downstairs, assess the damage, call back to me, let me know what's going on. I'm like, all right, jump back into my cart. I go back downstairs to B2, yellow, where his office was. So that's the 2 levels under street level of building 1. And I'm walking the area. I get out of my cart. I walk the area towards elevator banks that are down there to see if there's further damage. And I come across the first elevator bank, and sure enough, I come across 2 people who are injured. They worked for ABM, which is the building maintenance people, and it appears that they were standing in front of the elevator bank, and as the elevators fell and the pressure built, it just kind of blew them uh, and knocked them to the back wall of where they were standing. So I'm trying to call my dispatcher to tell them that we needed emergency care or medical assistance. But obviously at this point there's so much chatter I couldn't get through to my dispatch. 2 of their co-workers, people that were working in their offices were also in B2 yellow. They come out, and I hear one of them say that a plane hit the building. They had TVs down there and they had the news on, and they said a plane hit the building. I was dumbfounded. I'm like, what do you mean? And in my head, I'm imagining some little Cessna, some small plane, something small. So I decide, in all my wisdom, that I want to go upstairs and see the carnage. So I go up an escalator, not an escalator. I go up a staircase that leads to the street level or the lobby level of the building. And I decide to then go into the lobby of building 2, go up escalators at this point to what was the mezzanine level that led out to the World Trade Center plaza. And there was already a Port Authority police officer standing there, not letting people out into the plaza because the plaza was it was there was complete destruction. There was debris and everything falling from the offices at the top of building 1. There were already bodies. In fact, I was standing inside the doorway, and I look out the door, and on the floor right in front of the door there was already a body. And this was the body of one of the window washers. Again, I look out onto the plaza, and all I see is complete destruction. There's all this paper and just stuff falling, and there were other people hurt and other bodies. And I decide that I want to look up and I want to see what the hell happened. And I can see 2 corners of the building. And from street level looking up onto this building, you can't really tell. And you're so close that there was no way I could tell, just and imagine just the sheer size of what that gap looked like. So again, in my head, a small plane hit it. So I decide, okay, I want to go down to my office in B2 red, that's B2 under building 2, and explain to my dispatcher what I've seen and where we need the most help. So I decide to come down to the lobby and go into an elevator bank that led down to my offices. Now, at this point, building 2 is still intact. Nothing's happened to building 2 yet. So, of course, the elevators are working. Everything here is okay. There's not a lot of evacuation going on, but there are some people leaving. So I go into this vestibule. These elevators just go down, and I press the button. And as soon as I press that button, I hear the next boom, and the building shakes, and some of the windows blow out, and two other security officers come into the vestibule as I moved back against the back wall, and I'm just kind of like holding myself, and I'm just like, oh my God, please, please, please. And they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm fine, but I suggest you guys kind of like just get out. And at that point in time in my head, what I imagined was that there was debris from building one falling onto building two. Again, I'm inside the building. I don't know what's going on. I don't know that another plane hit. So I still decide I want to go downstairs. I want to go tell my dispatch what is going on because there's no information getting to the dispatch. They cannot, all the garbled junk coming through the radio was inaudible. You couldn't understand what was going on. Everybody was talking over one another, despite Port Authority telling everybody, radio silence, emergencies only. But there were so many emergencies that it was just too much. So I decided to come out of the lobby, go down the staircase that I used to come up from earlier after finding the two ABM employees that were injured. And it only goes down one level. I have to go through the loading dock, which was at this point full of smoke and completely deserted in building two. This is not the loading dock that I initially went into after seeing the plume of smoke, which was in building one. So I come around a back way, down another set of staircases that leads me down to building a B2 level. I open the door, and my office is dark with the exception of like one emergency light that's on. And I can hear the office staff kind of running around. So I call out to them and I tell them, "Come on, I'll I'll take you up and get you out of here." It was five of them. There was our HR person, her assistant, our quartermaster, our dispatcher, and a painter. He just so happened to be painting our offices. So we come up one level, go around again in the loading dock full of smoke. We go up another level, and now we're in the street level, basically the shopping mall. For those that don't understand, there was an entire shopping mall in the lobby level of the Twin Towers. So you would be shopping, and then all of a sudden you would go through these banks of rotating doors, and you'd be inside the lobby of the tower. So I just tell them, just follow everybody out. Um, I decide that I want to go to building one, the building that I saw hit. So I decide I want to walk over there and see what's going on. And I run into Ken. And Ken tells me, he asks me, hey, did Antonio and Pete get out of the office? And I said, honestly, I never went back there. I don't know. So he actually ends up calling through the radio. We actually get a response from Antonio who says, yep, we're out. We're outside. So Ken tells me, go help building two, help with their evacuation. And if there's nothing to do, just, go get out. So I go over to building two, and I run into Ron Horner. Again, this is the manager, the general manager for Summit Security at the World Trade Center. And again, if you were walking down the stairs from the upper floors, this would be 110, right? If you were walking down the stairs, you would end up on the mezzanine level, a door that led out at the mezzanine level. And then you would go down escalators into the lobby level, go out these revolving doors, out to the shopping area, and then find other exits. So we weren't letting anybody out on any of the exits around the towers due to falling debris and falling people. So I jokingly, again, in my mind, a small plane hit building one. There was maybe some debris that hit building two. And jokingly, I tell Ron, looks like there's going to be a lot of overtime. And yeah, jokingly enough, yeah, there sure is. And he says, just kind of help out here. At this point, I see people coming down the escalators. We shut down the one going up so that we had two lanes of escalators coming down. And I turn around and I notice that the revolving doors are still just revolving. So I decide, you know what? Let me fold these doors up so that people just run out as opposed to spending this time revolving. So I run into another officer, uh, Officer Salcedo. Salcedo was Dominican. He had just finished working a double from afternoon shift to midnight shift, just got off work, but was still hanging around. So I tell, again, I joke and I'm like, dude, go home to your family. Um, but he decides to stick around and help me fold these doors. So we fold these doors. It was like eight revolving doors, and now traffic is going well. I thank him and I bid him farewell. I'm like, dude, get out of here. There's no reason for you to stick around. So I'm standing by the escalators at the bottom of the escalators, and there's one row where people are just coming down, and then I look, and the next row there's there's a bottleneck. There's nobody coming down really quickly on that side. So I decide to come up and meet the folks. Apparently, an elderly lady was being helped by a gentleman in a suit, but the elderly lady wasn't walking. She wasn't walking very quickly. So she was sort of holding up the evacuation. So I tell the guy in the suit, I said, I got her. I'll take her from here. I'll help her out. Um, we get down to the bottom of the escalator and we start walking. And the lady is walking very slowly and she's extremely apologetic. She's like, I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on with me. I can't seem to. I sort of froze up. Obviously, in hindsight, she was probably going through shock. So I decide to, we walk out of the revolving doors. Now we're in like the shopping area. And all of a sudden, there was this sense of urgency that came over me. And I told her, I said, ma'am, I hope you don't mind, but I may have to, I think I'm just going to pick you up. So I decided to scoop her up like a baby and just run down this corridor with her to where we were evacuating everybody, which was like at the opposite end of the complex. So I make my way towards there. On my way there, I come across Glenn Savory. Glenn Savory was this Trinidadian dude, very boisterous, older gentleman. He was one of the supervisors at the World Trade Center. He had been there for a long time. And he sees me carrying the lady, and I'm like, yep, I got her. And I pass him by, and I'm taking this lady out, and I get just before turning the corner to where the escalators were to take her up, and I'm struggling at this point. I was like literally like trying to run with this lady, and just then, just as my knees were buckling, these two guys came up from behind me. They're like, bro, we got her. They scooped her up, and I'm like, okay, here, I'll take you guys to where you should be going. There should be ambulances up there. So I leave them at the escalator, let them go up, and I decide, let me go back. Let me finish helping evacuate building two. And I get about halfway. On my way back, I don't see Glenn Savory. And I decide, you know what? I'm tired. Something inside me says, you know what, dude? there's more stuff going on outside. There's a lot more crowd control help that needs to be done outside. Why don't you just go outside? So I decide to go out this doorway that leads out to Vesey Street. And Vesey Street was it was the street that was between Building 1, Tower 1, the one with the big antenna, the Customs Building, which was World Trade Center 6, which was like right next to Building 1. And then across the street was where Building 7 was. That's where the trucks would go down into the loading dock. So on my way there, I run into another officer, Officer Gilliard, and he's blocking the doorway. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Why are you blocking this door? Like, all of these people could be heading out here. Vessey's far enough from World Trade Center 1 where they're safe from falling debris. He's like, no, I was told to stand here and, not let anybody out. I said, listen, dude, I'm coming out this door. I would suggest you get out of here and just let these people out. So I go out the door. I run across Vesey Street, and then I go past Building 7, and I meet up with some of the other truck dock security officers. I run up to one officer. She always reminded me of my mom, and I'm like, at this point it was such an emotional thing that I broke down. I was like, you don't understand what I've seen. There's dead bodies all over the plaza. There's people, throwing themselves off the building, and this is when she tells me that she saw the plane hit, and I'm like, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. She's like, yeah, it was like a big plane. And from where I was standing on West Broadway, where the trucks would get checked, you can only see Building 1. You can't see Building 2 because it's south and slightly east because they were sort of catty cornered. So I couldn't see Building 2. Again, in my mind, it doesn't register that there were two planes. One plane hit the building and it caused a lot of carnage. So I spend like a minute or two talking to them there, and I decide, I want to call home. I want to let somebody at my house know what I've seen and that I'm okay. I walk down like 2 blocks, try to go into businesses, ask people if they could let me use their phone. I don't have any change on me. I can't, there weren't any payphones around that area. Everybody denied me, so I'm like, okay, fine. I'm hearing my dispatch, who I got out from our office, calling for help with crowd control back on Church Street. So this was the street east of the complex. Church Street, and then they needed more help up on Fulton. Fulton was where folks would come out of the like the 4 and the 5 trains that led into like Brooklyn and the Bronx. So I decide to go back up that way or down that way, um, and I turn left to go east, and I come across Giuliani. Him and his entourage were running towards Building 7. As I said, that was the mayor's emergency bunker. So they're just running in the street, in the middle of the street, actually. It was like maybe 15 of them. And I'm like, oh shit, mayor. And so they go ahead and I guess, I didn't see where they went once I passed them, but I go up to Church. I make a right to go south, closer to the Trade Center, and I end up right in front of the old church that's there that has this this graveyard. And I come across Officer Challenger. Now, Challenger was posted in a security booth out on the West Side Highway that was right in front of World Trade Center 1. This is where the folks would pull up, use their IDs to get in, or show their placards to go down into the parking area. So he was in one of those booths, and he was completely distraught. he tells me his booth was covered in body parts, and he was, I mean, mentally he was just, you could see the thousand-yard stare in his eyes. And I grabbed him, I hugged him, I said, bro, it's gonna be all right. And as I let him go, I turn and I look up at the towers, and for the first time I realized Tower 2 was hit, and that these gashes are huge. So I'm right across the street from the complex. I'm right across building 5, and right behind building 5 through the plaza is, the two towers. And I look up, and as soon as I look up, I hear the rumbling, and it sounds like a freight train is coming at us. And all of a sudden, you see the plume of smoke and dust. And for the split second that I did look, it looked like building 2 was going to fall and collapse onto us, the upper level. So Challenger runs up behind me, heading east up to Fulton Street, and I turned to the right, and I decided I wanted to go down into the train station. My concern was falling debris. So I said, I'm going to go down. So I get to the bottom of these steps, maybe 10 steps, and the plume of dust just covers everything and it goes dark. I'm standing like at almost eye level to this fluorescent light, and all I see is just this brightness. I'm literally next to it, but I turned and I couldn't see anything else from how thick this smoke was. And mind you, I'm wearing this like mechanic's jumpsuit, this grease monkey outfit with a vest, a bulletproof vest under my outfit. So I don't have anything to cover my nose with. So I'm breathing this stuff in, and it's filling the back of my throat to the point where it felt like I was taking crackers and crumbling them up and just like shoving them down my throat. And so I'm trying to cough this stuff out and cough and cough. And you can hear people saying, don't breathe this stuff in, because there was a bunch of other people down there with me. So the rumbling stops, and some of us turn to go back up the stairs, but it's completely dark. I mean, dark. It's as if, and remember, September 11th was a nice sunny day, clear. It was dark, pitch dark at the top of the stairs. So I decided to take everyone through the subway system and get out on the opposite end, far away from the collapse. So we go through the turnstiles, or the security door, and we walk down this platform, this train platform. There were two trains on each side, so there was enough light that we can see and make our way through. So we made our way to the opposite end. This is now like 2 blocks away from the trade center, 2 or 3 blocks. And when you get to the end, there's like 2 staircases to go up on either side, and we see firefighters there, and they're directing us to go out one of the staircases. So we go out the staircase, and there at the top are more firefighters with water bottles. They're giving us water to drink. They're like, here, flush that stuff out of you. So at this point, the dust is basically being flushed out as snot out of my nose, and I'm coughing it up, trying to throw it up. They're pouring water all over us to wash the stuff off. They're adamant about us washing this stuff off. And in hindsight, I think the reason why I didn't get sick the way some of the other folks got sick from being exposed is because of that. They actually went in and they threw this water on us and they flushed this stuff out of us. So at this point, obviously, I know that one of the building two collapsed. I was desperate to find a phone and just let somebody know I'm safe because that was the building I was in. That was the building our offices were in. And I needed to let somebody know. Everybody at my house was working. I was able to call, uh, but I think my grandmother was there. So I was able to tell somebody at home I was there. And then I decided to call, you know, whichever friends or girlfriends phone numbers I knew, again, to just let more people know, hey, I'm out. I got out of there. And so I was able to make my phone calls. Somebody was nice enough to give me quarters. And at this point, I decide I want to go back down there. I want to go back down there. I want to see if I can help some more. And I get about halfway down to the area, and I come across another security officer who's also distraught. You know, we embrace. He gives me a hug, and building one collapses, and we're like on Fulton or maybe a street east, so we're further away from the collapse. We can see the plume of smoke come kind of shoot out one of the side streets. Um, and at that point, it was like a sense of defeat. Like, what do you do? So we decide to walk around and kind of see if we can come across any other coworkers. Um, at any given time, there was at least 20 of us running around, 20, 30 of us. Um, and we end up finding maybe four other officers. So for the rest of the day, about six of us were somewhere around City Hall, One Police Plaza, kind of looking out for other coworkers, trying to find people that we knew, and kind of stick together. And we didn't come across anybody else until and we stayed there until like two something in the afternoon. At that point, I had to walk home. I walked not like halfway, but a considerable way back home. I was living all the way in Far Rockaway. It's like on the train is like 2 hours away from where I grew up. Um, so I had to go down to Canal Street, which is Chinatown, hang a right, cross the Manhattan Bridge into Brooklyn, then walk like another half mile or a mile east until I finally found a train station I was allowed to go into and take the train home. That ride was quiet, it was solemn. There was a child that asked his mother if I was there. The mom said yes, he was there. She kind of whispered it. As I sat in one of the corner seats in the train, just kind of dazed and confused, not in complete shock. I, I couldn't understand what I had witnessed. I get home and, I take a shower, I hang up my uniform, and for like the next 3 months, I was locked in my room in shock and fear. I was afraid. Some security tried to put me back at a post somewhere at some college. I think I spent maybe 2 or 3 hours there before I was like, listen, dude, you guys have to find somebody to replace me because mentally, I can't just stand here. So I terminated my employment with them. I found some other security company, and it was 3 months later that I went to work for the American Stock Exchange, which just so happened to be 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center. So I I remained working at the American Stock Exchange up until they cleared the hole. So I was able to be there to see them clear the hole out. And at that point, I decided to move. I couldn't be in New York anymore. I felt whatever was holding me there was enough for me to just leave. And I decided to move to Jersey. I lived in Jersey for about a year and a half, and now I'm here in Florida. I've been in Tampa now for 20 years, going on 21 years. So I tell you this story not so much to relive it, but to, I guess, put it out into the world to let people know that, there are some of us out here. I have a friend or two on my Facebook that worked there with me. They weren't there that morning, but they worked in the building with me. And it was a wake up moment. Weeks later, I would come to, you know, start digging into what went on. What happened? How did this happen? The planes weren't shot down. They say there were some military exercises. I wondered about Building 7. Building 7 was not hit. It was not hit with debris to the point where it fell and collapsed. The office fires, I mean, if you look in recent times, you'll find buildings in Europe and in England, buildings that went completely up in flames and never collapsed. So to hear that this building that was intact collapsed at free fall speed was the wake up call. Like I was like, how the hell did that happen? And then more stuff comes out, and I watch a film called Loose Change. Loose Change had a lot of the information about what was going on. It's the one that reminded us about Donald Rumsfeld on September 10th, telling the world about the 2.3 trillion dollars that the Pentagon didn't couldn't account for. Um, so that just spiraled and got me going down these rabbit holes. And the NIST report came out, and the NIST report doesn't mention Building 7, and it tells all of these inconsistencies. So, of course, at that point, my worldview collapsed. Again, before then, the government loved me. I was paying my taxes to make sure that there were roads and that, people got fed. But at that point, my whole worldview was destroyed. And that's what led me to where I am today. Um, Around 2017, I was a bit distracted. I was going through a divorce, and I had a new job and reconnected with an ex and all this other stuff, and um, I wasn't paying much attention. I I was extremely in shock to see that Trump won, primarily because I said there was no way they were going to let Trump win. Hillary Clinton is part of the establishment. There's no way Trump is going to win. And when I woke up that morning and Trump won, I said, "Oh shit, something is wrong." But there was so much controversy swimming around that I kind of just got all of this overload stuff, and I stopped paying attention. And it wasn't until COVID hit that I started paying attention again. So I wasn't in the initial roundup or the initial release of the Q um, drops, but I was put onto them, and then I started slowly reading through them and understanding what was going on, and since then, I felt like my life's mission was to make people see what is going on. And of course, my family, my friends, my high school friends were the first ones to turn their backs on me. Um, Everybody always, says, "Oh, you're such a smart guy. You're one of the smart people, smartest people I know. Why do you believe this crap?" And I'm like, that statement, you're saying it all right there. I believe this crap because I'm looking into it, and it makes sense. So why don't you engage me in some conversation? Maybe I can show you some of the things that I found, and maybe it'll make sense to you too. But as we know, uh, lefties aren't. about talking or facts. So that was a difficult one. But slowly, some of my friends, some of my family members have come around. They have woken up. My sister lives in New York, and she went complete. You know, she was completely in fear when COVID hit, and she thought, you know, this was like we're all gonna die. And I was like, listen, just calm down. It's not what you think. They're trying to scare us. And you know, she woke up. So yeah, I you know, I come on here, I share things, and even beyond what we see in politics and what we believe our government is doing, I believe there's levels to this thing. I believe that there is even deeper meanings, deeper curtains that we have to pull back and understand that the world as a whole is not what we think. The whole world is a stage, and what we're seeing unfold before us is a movie made to awaken everyone else that has been having a really tough time seeing what we've been seeing for the past 5 years. So, with that, you know, if you guys want to read the story, this is basically the report that I wrote about a month or so after 9/11. It's at magaarmor.com, and it's under the blog. And I posted this back like 3 years ago. I wanted to finally post it, and you'll see some pictures on here. This was Ken Grisales. This was the mezzanine level that looked down onto the lobby level, so that you can kind of understand and see the visuals of what I am trying to explain. This was the plaza. This was sort of the view of the building from ground level that I was looking up at. This is a diagram of basically what it was like under the World Trade Center. These are some of the folks that lost their lives. On the left, you'll find Ron Horner. On the right, you'll find Salcedo, who helped me fold those revolving doors. Here, you'll see me. Ken is like right behind me. Nancy Joyner, Ron Horner standing in front of Antonio Gordon's little office where he, you know, would monitor the cameras. And then there's the path here that I took from World Trade Center 2, where I carried the lady through the uh, through the plaza, through the shopping area, out to the street. And this is where they grabbed her from me. This is Officer Gilliard, who was guarding that door on Vesey Street that I told him to, you know, I'm going out that door. He also lost his life. I don't know how. I don't know where he ended up going. He was literally right in front of a door to get out of the building. This is Officer Challenger, the one that I saw right before the collapse that I hugged, who was in a booth. You could see he was completely distraught. The vest, the jumpsuit, what it looked like looking up from the subway station, the jumpsuit again, the back, you could see the palm prints here, my boots, and then more folks that lost their lives that day. And so yeah, like I said, I suffered some survivor's guilt. I didn't understand why I made it out, and some of these folks who were so close to exits, who were outside most of the time. This gentleman here was Robert Martinez. He was outside the entire time, and then at some point in time decided to go back into the building and was caught in the collapse. Um, so yeah, just again, I would hope that you folks would hear this story, pass it along, you know, share it, let people hear it or see it, and you know, understand that we are living with a veil over our faces, and we have to lift this veil. I pray that President Trump uh, declassifies the documents from 9/11, and that we finally find the truth. and see what actually happened. And then we'll see some noticings at that point. For those who know who was truly involved in this event. So, good night, folks. Thank you for staying with me if you did for this hour as I recounted the story. Again, uh, rest in peace to Charlie Kirk. Happy Patriots Day. Never forget. And thank you. Have a good night, guys.